Yesterday, President Bush paid tribute to Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman at a ceremony in the Eisenhower Executive Office building. The president was joined by Mr. Friedman and National Economic Advisor LINDSEY at this 20-minute event.
It's my honor to give a very short introduction to Dr. Larry Lindsey.
Thank you. It's truly a great honor to be here today with Milton and Rose Friedman. As many of you know, the Friedmans rarely come to Washington. Now, some people think this is because of ideological reasons. Others think it's because anyone with good sense would stay in the Bay Area as much as possible. I have a different view. It's because Milton and Rose are such great believers in the signaling value of the price mechanism. After all, this is a city where for many years the British Foreign Service gave hazardous duty pay to anyone who worked here. One of the first papers I had to write in graduate school was about alternative consumption function, the permanent income hypothesis. Friedman argued that families do not spend out of current income, but based on their view of their long-run income. He used a very straightforward technique. He compared spending of groups of people with stable incomes with those with unstable incomes. And he used a wide variety of different groups for comparison. It was something like 16 different comparisons. Very robust study. Well, Milton, after all these years, I've thought of a group that you left out. It is the White House senior staff. And it certainly proves the permanent income hypothesis. None of our families have been able to cut their spending as fast as our incomes have gone down. Well, these stories reflect part of the contribution that Milton Friedman has made. He proved conclusively what the British Foreign Office always knew, that Washington can be hazardous to your health. He showed that permanence is important, not just in income, but more crucially in ideas. For the ideas and insights that Milton Friedman provided have certainly proved enduring. They've been connected by a simple yet profound theme: the promotion of human freedom. And he did all this with a humility that's truly extraordinary among economists. So today, we salute you for your ideas, for their timeliness, and for the straightforward and direct way in which you said them. The legacy of the Friedmans is that they have pushed and promoted freedom in many ways, and for many years. Today, I have a distinct honor to introduce another apostle of freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the President of the United States.
Thank you all. Ed, how are you? Welcome. Mr. Secretary. Chairman, please be seated. Thank you all very much. It's an honor for me to be here to pay tribute to a hero of freedom, Milton Friedman. He has used a brilliant mind to advance a moral vision, the vision of a society where men and women are free to choose, but where government is not as free to override their decisions. That vision has changed America, and it is changing the world. All of us owe a tremendous debt to this man's towering intellect and his devotion to liberty. So it's my honor to welcome you all to the White House. Thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to having lunch. I appreciate Larry Lindsey. I want to thank him for his leadership and his friendship. I, of course, want to welcome Rose Friedman as well. I'm so honored that the Secretary of Defense, Don Rumsfeld, has joined us, as well as the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz. I want to thank the Chairman for being here. Chairman Greenspan is a steady influence on our country, and I appreciate your leadership. I want to welcome Dr. Gary Becker, professor at the University of Chicago, who mentored Milton Friedman, a Nobel Prize winner. And I want to thank Giddy for coming as well. Welcome. And I appreciate Ed Meese being here as well. It's great to see you, General. Milton Friedman has shown us that when government attempts to substitute its own judgments for the judgments of free people, the results are usually disastrous. In contrast to the free market's invisible hand, which improves the lives of people, the government's invisible foot tramples on people's hopes and destroys their dreams. He has never claimed that free markets are perfect, yet he has demonstrated that even an imperfect market produces better results than arrogant experts and grasping bureaucrats. But Milton Friedman does not object to government controls solely because they are ineffective. His deeper objections flow from a moral framework. He has taught us that a free market system's main justification is its moral strength. Human freedom serves the cause of human dignity. Freedom rewards creativity and work. And you cannot reduce freedom in our economy without reducing freedom in our lives. As Milton Friedman has written, I know of no society that has been marked by a large measure of political freedom and that has not also used something comparable to a free market to organize the bulk of economic activity. This viewpoint was once controversial, as was Milton Friedman himself. When he began his work, the conventional wisdom held that capitalism's days were numbered. Free market systems were thought to be unsuited to modern problems. Today, we recognize that free markets are the great engines of economic development. They're the source of wealth and the hope of a world weary of poverty and weary of oppression. We have seen Milton Friedman's ideas at work in Chile, where a group of economists called the Chicago Boys brought inflation under control and laid the groundwork for economic success. We have seen them at work in Russia, where the government recently adopted a 13% flat tax with impressive results. We have seen them at work in Sweden, which has adopted personal retirement accounts. We have seen them even at work in China, where the government conceded long ago that Marxism was, in their words, no longer suited to China's problems. These are extraordinary developments. They demonstrate that the rest of the world is finally catching up with Milton Friedman. Yet Milton Friedman has done more than defend freedom as an abstract ideal. He has creatively applied the power of freedom to the problems of our own country. And in the process, he has become an influential social reformer. Milton has shown us how freedom can enhance our national security. He is the intellectual godfather of our all-volunteer Army. He argued that America could rely on the dedication of soldiers who serve in armed forces of their own free will. And he was right. We have recently seen the quality and idealism and skill of the all-volunteer Army. Those who serve our country by choice are serving it with honor. Milton Friedman has also shown us how freedom can foster educational reform. For many years, he has been a tireless advocate of school choice as a way of empowering parents and improving the performance of our schools. Educational reform advances when parents have the information and the authority to push for reform. And there's no greater authority than a good alternative. Poor children in America need better options when they're trapped in schools that will not teach and will not change. In all of these issues and debates, Milton Friedman has argued with consistency and courage and trademark bluntness. His ideas have influence around the world. And by his strength of conviction, he has served his country with distinction. And it's been recognized as such. After all, he received the 1976 Nobel Prize for Economics, and in 1988, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 1938, Milton Friedman married Rose Director, an outstanding economist in her own right, and the only person known to have ever won an argument with Milton. Half a century later, Milton and Rose Friedman published a joint memoir called Two Lucky People. There's no doubt that Milton and Rose Friedman have been lucky, but not as lucky as America. We're lucky that their parents chose to immigrate from Europe. We're lucky they gave them the love and encouragement they needed to be bold and to succeed. We're lucky that Milton Friedman flunked some of his qualifying exams to become an actuary and became an economist instead. We're thankful for those tough exams, but not nearly as thankful as we are for the lives and talents and intellect of Milton and Rose Friedman. May God bless them both, and welcome.
I'm going to say a few remarks. Yeah, they got this.
To say that I'm overwhelmed would be an understatement. This is a wonderful occasion. I wish it were all true. But, you know, even a little will go a long way. I have been extremely fortunate. Most fortunate of all in having been born in this great country, rather than where my parents came from. Had I been born there, I don't know what I would be. When they were there, it was Hungary. Later on, it became part of Czechoslovakia. Later on, still, it became part of Russia. It's now part of the Ukraine. So I don't know whether I would be a Czech or a Ukrainian or a Russian. But it's a great honor and pleasure for me to see so many people in this audience with whom I have been fortunate enough to have had a connection one way or another. It's not only the people who have spoken, but Anna Schwartz, who is over here, whom I collaborated with for more than 30 years in a very fruitful collaboration, which enabled us, between us, to do what neither of us separately could have done. And there are so many of my former students in this room, and you know, the greatest thing about being a teacher are the students whom you've had. They're the ones who make your work valuable. Antonio Martino here, not only do we have the Secretary of Defense of the United States, but we have the Secretary of Defense of Italy, and neither one of them was ever trained to be Secretary of Defense. But both of them are engaged in the one function of government which nobody denies is a function of government. I was very lucky, but the next most lucky thing to me was to be seated next to Rose Director in the fall of 1932 at the University of Chicago in my first graduate course in economics, Economics 301, under Professor Jacob Viner. And out of that has grown a fruitful lifetime with Rose. And she has won many an argument with me, not only one. But I can go on and on. Alan Greenspan, whom I met many years ago and who has been a joy and a pleasure as a companion, as a debating companion, but more importantly, who deserves very high marks for doing a difficult job extremely well. Gary Becker, who is my favorite student from way, way back, and who has changed the character of economics. It no longer is a narrow discipline it once was. It covers a much wider range, and it does that because of his contributions, which are continuing. So I have been very fortunate indeed. Don Rumsfeld I first met thanks to Bill Baruti of the American Enterprise Institute, who got me in touch with him when he was a congressman heading a small group, including Melvin Laird, Tom Curtis, and several others who were trying to form a new economic platform for the Republican Party. And what I learned most from that was that not all congressmen were people whose only interest was in getting reelected. That there were congressmen, and an important number of congressmen, who were interested in what they were doing, who wanted to get elected to do something and not simply to be in a position of power. And the rest of his life has shown that that was not restricted to his activity as a congressman. So I have very much to be grateful for. I am grateful to the President for those fine words and for having arranged this session here. And I apologize to everybody here whom I haven't mentioned. Gordon St. Angelo, who is doing a wonderful job in running our Foundation for Economic Education. But now I want to close by telling you what my fundamental principle of government that affects government financial policy is. It's a simple thing, a simple story. If you spend some money on yourself, and two things are true when you spend money on yourself. You're careful how much you spend, and you're very careful how you spend it. You spend your own money on somebody else. Well, you're careful about how much you spend, but you don't worry so much about how well you spend it. You spend somebody else's money on yourself. Well, you don't care how much you spend, but you care a great deal how well you spend it. You spend somebody else's money on somebody else, and you don't care how you spend it, how much you spend, and you don't care how you spend it. That's government. And that's the fundamental reason. Government spending is too big, and government spending is wasted, and that anything we can do to keep down government spending is a good thing. We just should restrict it to those activities like defense, which we really need to do. Thank you.
Good job. We'll see you over there for lunch. Okay, thanks.
Also yesterday, President Bush met with Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee to discuss consideration of judicial nominees. As the meeting was wrapping up, the president spoke briefly with reporters.
I want to thank the senators for being here today. We're talking about judges. We have a vacancy crisis in America. There are too many seats that aren't filled with judges, and therefore America hurts. America is not getting the justice it needs. Ours is a system that relies upon an independent court system, and when there's vacancies, the American people suffer. And I call upon the Senate to approve, at least give hearings to people we've sent up to the Senate. There are 30 circuit court vacancies in America, and they've approved 7. This is a bad record, and it's a record that's bad for the country.